Yeah, we're ready. All right. Welcome, everybody, to Pwning in the Sandbox, OSX, macro exploitation, and beyond. So we're glad everybody, was able to make it here. It's end of con, and there's lots of travel going on, but we appreciate it, and we think it'll be worthy. At least we hope so. We're excited to give this to you guys. First, just a little disclaimer, just that the views and opinions of the presentation are our own and don't necessarily reflect the views of our employer. So we're just going to get that out there and start with the introduction. So my name is Danny Chrastil. I go by Disconnect on Twitter and most everywhere. But I work for the red team at Walmart, our internal red team. I have the background of web dev and sysadmin on web servers, and just kind of got into security that way once I realized sites can actually be compromised, and I thought that was really cool. So I want to learn how to do it, and I figured out I could get paid to do that. So I did, and love it, and went from a lot of web app to kind of getting a lot of reconnaissance and OSINT and exploring all different kinds of things, and then eventually landing in red teaming, which has been awesome. We have a really cool team. For my free time, I am a beekeeper, so that's pretty cool. I like honey and manage bees in my backyard, so, gotta get a break from the hacking it sometimes. Also, I am a Empire dev and contributor, so one of the big projects I've been working on is the Empire GUI, which is a ongoing project that's in beta, but it's a lot of fun, so if you get a chance, you could check that out.
And I'm Adam Gold. I go by ImportAU on Twitter. I'm on the blue team at Walmart. I enjoy coding in Python. I am also an Empire contributor, and in my free time, I enjoy snowboarding. So just a quick plug for InfoSec at Walmart. We have over 600 InfoSec associates. We cover over 130 million IP addresses. We have exhausted the entirety of RFC 1918 internally. We have a private cloud of over 900,000 physical cores, and we are always hiring. And if you're not interested in working for us, you maybe want to come hang out with us. We have a free security conference every year in Bentonville, Arkansas. So definitely check that out. It's at SparkOn on Twitter.
So this is we have a red-blue story. So, our red team started about 2.5 years ago, maybe a little bit further than that. And, we've gone through all the growing pains of red teams and blue teams learning how to work together, the good and the bad. And I'm really proud of the purple team effort. Obviously we're both up here and we're not fighting and wrestling to the ground and stuff. But we like to collaborate together, after campaigns we put our heads together and figure out solutions and dig deeper, and it's really cool. And that kind of led to how this whole thing got started. So we have a mixed environment. So we have over 12,000 Macs and 373,000 Windows systems. That's not including servers. So we wanted to specifically be able to target both of these with a malicious macro. We wanted to be able to land. We didn't know where we're going to land. Is this going to land in Mac? Is this going to land in Windows? And we wanted to have something that was really comprehensive and do both. And the hard part is that there's some maybe malicious macro documents out there in an early stage of Empire, but they didn't handle a lot of the little minor details of VBA, and so from version to version to version, it always would break. And so that kind of led into this, and it got into the whole question of Apple security in general, and I just want to start off with this little
Hello,
clip.
I'm a Mac.
And I'm a PC.
Gesundheit, you okay?
No, I'm not okay. I have that virus that's going around.
Oh, yeah.
You better stay back. This one's a doozy.
That's okay, I'll be fine.
No, do not be a hero. Last year there were 114,000 known viruses for PCs.
PCs, not Macs. So, you just grab this.
I think I got a crash.
Hey, if you feel like that'll help, good.
We love that. Sadly, that is the mentality, especially, 7 years ago, but even now, when you bring up macros for Macs, people are like, wait, that exists? And it's like, well, yeah, of course, they exist and we use them all the time. And so here's some stuff from John Lambert even, posting about Mac macros that were found in the wild and that he does reversing. And so they're out there. Macs are not immune to viruses or exploitable macros, and it's good to be able to recognize that. And that's what jumped really into a lot of stuff that we're doing.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick overview of VBA. We're going to jump into some VBA functions that exist on Mac OS, and then hopefully we'll be able to do some live demos of how we can escape out of the sandbox. So for those that don't know, Visual Basic, or VBA stands for Visual Basic for Applications, and it's a Windows programming language that was first launched with Microsoft Excel 5.0 in 1993. And it is built to extend the functionality of Office applications. So if you have a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet and you want to be able to do some code on the back end, you can essentially enhance your document with some scripting. And it was first introduced to Macs in Office for Mac 2011. But the functionality and feature set are changing frequently. So if you go read through the release notes, they're always changing various little tweaks and things to the way VBA works on a Mac. It'll change between version to version, and they'll add new features. And so what we wanted to do is see what can we do with just native VBA for Mac. So, one of the first things we wanted to do is just execute code. So one of the things you can do is you can directly call C functions from the shared C library. And so we can essentially use Excel to do our red teaming for us. And so, for those that don't know, the system function in libc.dylib allows you to execute shell commands. So what we could do is import the system function from libc.dylib, like so, and see what else we can do with this. So we can open or we can download a web page, save it to python.txt. It's not necessarily restricted to Python. We can do it in Bash, or we could also do it in Ruby. Now, hypothetically, let's say we don't have access to the system call. What about the popen function, which allows you to open a pipe to a process? So we can now do the same thing that we were doing with system. We can do the same thing with popen. So here we are aliasing popen to the function webpopen, and now our code that was downloading using Python looks like this, where we just pass the webpopen function our code and a variable to say that it's read. So another function within VBA is called MacScript. It is a deprecated function, but it is still functional. And it is designed to execute AppleScript and return a value returned by the script if there's any. So for those that don't know, AppleScript is like a Bash-like programming language that Apple has invented to allow you to open applications or tell the operating system to do various things. And MacScript accepts these commands. So we can tell the Apple to say something using a voice. We can tell it to open text edit. We can tell it to open a website or just do a shell command. It can also accept scripts. So you can define a function and inside the script perhaps open up a reverse shell. We can also use MacScript to grant file write access. And we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get down to the entitlement section of the application sandbox. There's also another function called AppleScript task, which allows you to run an AppleScript from VB. And if you notice in the red area, this is a command that will allow you to execute AppleScript outside of the sandbox app. It is a direct OS API call. And it is the approved way to call AppleScripts from VBA. And the security around this is that you have to have an AppleScript on the box before you can run AppleScript tasks, and you can just call the function from AppleScript. And one of the ways that this might happen is you install an add-in, or you have a manual process to put an AppleScript in the designated location, and that location is in the user's library, application scripts, and then the com.microsoft.product, where product is Word, Excel, or PowerPoint. Now that we've covered all of the various functions that we have available to us, we should talk about Apple's App Sandbox, which is a form of containerization, and it's used to limit access that the application has to system resources. And it was first introduced in Office for Mac 2016. So if you're running 2011, you should definitely upgrade to 2016 so you get all of the benefits and security controls around the sandbox. And for Microsoft, this container exists at the user's directory, library, containers, com.microsoft.product/data. And permissions to what the sandbox can do are granted by entitlements. And so these entitlements are code signed to prevent you from modifying them. So you can't go in and say, I want to modify the entitlements and give myself full read and write access. And you can view these entitlements with the following command. So you can just --display -v -entitlement space -space, and then the application you want to check. And what this does is it allows access to certain binaries as long as they don't modify files external to the sandbox. So a perfect example of this is SSH. So by default, SSH tries to look at the host key and the known host file. But you can pass it options that make it no longer do this, and it means that you can now use SSH inside the sandbox because it's not reaching outside of the sandbox. And then another thing that they give you access to is the security utility, because you have to be able, your application needs to be able to interact with the keychain, and the keychain is where all of your secrets are stored. So one of the functions available to you in the security function is dump keychain. So hypothetically, inside the sandbox, we could dump the keychain and dump it into the sandbox, and the user, as long as they allow us to, they'll click allow and give us their password. And it allows you to do full, like you essentially have full read and write access inside of the container. So you could drop files, you can upload files, download files if you had a shell, or whatever you need to do inside the shell. So now that we've covered all of the things that we can do in the sandbox, let's see what kind of things we can do that are a little bit more on the fun side. And I'll hand it back to Danny.
All right, so we're going to do our first demo here of a couple. So let me switch over. And we actually have the macro on here. So we're running in Empire. So we're going to use this to handle all of our shells. So we have, this is our Mac environment, and this first macro I'm going to open, this is just a pure Empire shell. There's nothing fancy that's going on, but let's watch this execute. So, alright, we're going to enable macros because we trust macros all the time. Alright, look, Derbycon free tickets. Oh! So you see in the background now we have an Empire agent calling in, and you can see we have a better image on the document indicating so. So now we could go to agents, and we could interact with this agent that we have. And so we'll do a quick, should we do, who am I? And then, I'm gold, and then let's see where we're at. So we are inside of this container. So we are inside of the sandbox. So to prove that we don't really have permissions to do much, I have a couple commands we're going to be copy-pasting for ease of use. So the first one, this is going to echo hi into a file on the desktop. So let's try to do that. All right, so executed, operation not permitted, right? So now we do not have permission to write to the desktop as this user. So in this case, say we did some recon on this engagement beforehand, and what we did is we found somebody who, posted a private key, SSH private key on GitHub or something. We're going to use this as our example. So during recon, we downloaded that SSH key. And so now, what we're going to do is we're going to take that SSH key, and we're going to upload it to the target. So we're going to upload it inside of the container because we have access to do so. Okay, so now we have uploaded our IDE RSA file. To get that to work, we have to change the permissions here. So we're going to change that. And now to get this to work, to be able to interact with SSH, because this is going to be our goal, we're going to try to get out of the sandbox using SSH. We need to pass off this shell. And we're going to pass it off to a netcat listener, because Empire doesn't use a true TTY. It's just a standard in, standard out kind of thing. Send a response, or send a request, get a response. But we need more interactivity to really get a shell. So we're going to take this command. So we have a listener started on our Kali box. And then we're going to pass in this bash command. And here we go. So now we are still within the container here. But just wanted to make sure that we are outside of Empire. And now to get a true TTY, you have to have a TTY to interact with SSH because you have to pass in the SSH key and everything. So we are going to do this Python code that does a pseudo TTY. This is a pretty common thing you could find on the internet to use. So now we have a TTY. So to try to get out of the sandbox, we're going to take that SSH key that we stole from Recon, and we're going to SSH into the user's own box with that key. So let's take that one. And now we're passing those flags that Adam was talking about, because we don't want SSH to try to touch disk, because if it does, then we're going to get permission denied. So here we go. Now, let's see where we're at. We are outside of the sandbox, and just to prove that, we'll run that same command to write to the desktop. And, there we are. So now we were able to escape the sandbox in that specific situation. So, Adam.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to step through all of the steps that we just went through there in a graphical representation. So, if you're the attacker, you have already stolen the SSH key, whether it was from GitHub or some other various location, and you're going to make a malicious document that creates a shell. The user's going to go ahead and get this pop-up. They're going to enable macros because macros are cool. And we're going to get a shell inside of the application sandbox. Then we're going to have that call out to our Empire server. We're going to have the SSH key uploaded to the Empire server. Then we're going to upload it inside the sandbox. And we're going to go ahead and SSH out of the sandbox. And like in our example, we used a reverse shell, like a bash shell, but Perl, Netcat, Empire shells, they all work. And various other Empire modules work. You can do a keylogger inside the sandbox. You can prompt. You can create a screenshot. You can dump the keychain. Note, if you dump the keychain, it's going to ask the user for permission to every single one of the items in the keychain. So, fair warning. Now there was a lot of pre-requirements for that escape to work, right? Like, the user had to have remote logon turned on. You had to have their SSH key. Their SSH key had to be in their authorized key so you could SSH into the box. And that's kind of messy. There's a lot of things that have to line up for that to work. So we gave this talk and that exact demonstration at Seaside Denver, and after that, we had a couple people reach out to us on Twitter. One of those was Paulino Calderon. He goes by @Calderpone. He's a security researcher who uses MacScript to phish users, and he wrote a tool called MacPhish. And it allows you to create various documents that use MacScript to phish users. And so this spurred some research, started looking into what this MacScript function can do, and as I said, it was deprecated, so there wasn't too much good documentation on it, but hey, we'll see what we can do. So we're going to go ahead and do another demo. And hopefully the demo gods will be as excited about the first one as they are the second one. So we're going to go ahead and kill the document. We're going to go ahead and exit out of this. We're going to come back over here, exit the agent, and we're going to go ahead and open up our second document. Okay. Oh, yep. And so now we'll get the document, we'll hit enable macros, and a user will get this weird prompt that says Word needs to save this file in order to continue. This is sketchy, I don't want it, I'm going to cancel that. The file must be saved to view the document. Okay. Not this again. And we're stuck in this infinite loop of whether or not I'm going to agree to this. So, as a user, you're either going to try and hit Command Q, won't work, or you're going to click Save. So we click Save, and as you can see in the background, we now get a reverse shell, and the document changed. We interact with the agent, and let's see where we are. And we are at /. We are outside of the sandbox. So now, let's say I wanted to echo hi into the user's desktop just to prove I'm outside of the sandbox. We'll do test2.txt. Oh, I got a shell. This one's quite nice. Shell echo hi. Build that dollar desktop. Test2.txt. And I move the document, and as you can see down here in the corner, I have test2.txt. I have full right outside of the sandbox. So, one thing that is interesting here that I noticed the last time we started doing these demos that is interesting to a user is you can see here that there's an Apple script running in the background. And in this case, it's Microsoft, that Apple script, you can kill it, and like I still maintain my shell. You can force quit Word, I'll still maintain my shell. There's some really cool things there. Now, if you go and look in the processes, you'll see an OSA script process that's running this Apple script. So go ahead and exit this particular agent, and we'll go ahead and remove, just to make sure we don't have any more. Okay, and we'll now go ahead and kill this document. So now we'll go back to the slides, and we'll go through a graphical representation of what that actually is happening on the back end. So we have a malicious attacker. They create their malicious document, send it to the user. They get the enable macros button. Of course, they're going to click enable macros, because why wouldn't they? They're going to get this prompt that they need to save a file. If they click cancel, they're going to get stuck in this infinite loop until they agree to save our file. If they save the file, we save it to this super awesome directory. And then we use AppleScript to call our AppleScript that we've now created since they gave us permission to that directory. And we get an Empire shell outside of the sandbox. Now, there's a step there that's kind of annoying and a nuisance for the user that could maybe, like, figure out a way to stop executing that code, right? And so, what if there was a way for us to do that without having to ask the user for permission to save the file? So, a couple months ago, Adam Chester, who goes by @_xpn_, launched a sandbox escape using launch agents. So, what he would do is, he was looking through the entitlements and noticed this weird entitlement for temporary files. And what this problem, the problem here is this regex essentially allows file read and file write to any file as long as it starts with $, which for most people means it's a temporary file, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to use this to our advantage, and we're going to write a temporary file and then use AppleScript to call it. So we'll go ahead and jump out again, and we have one more demonstration. And we'll go ahead and double click. We'll click enable macros. And we have an agent. No user interaction other than agreeing to run the macros. We'll go ahead and shell pwd. Oh, I gotta interact first. And we are at slash again. Shell echo hi. $$ desktop test3.txt. And we have written to the desktop. We're outside of the sandbox, and we have full control over the system. And in this case, if the user's admin, we have whatever rights that they have to this box. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and show another graphical representation of what's actually happening in the background there. And so we have a malicious attacker. They create a malicious document. User gets the pop-up of a before. They enable macros. We write a temporary file to the application scripts directory. AppleScript calls it, and we have a reverse shell in Empire. So there's a lot of things here that like present opportunities for detections and prevention. So for those that don't know, there's on Mac there are these things called CF preferences. They're very similar to registry keys on Windows. And they allow you to create configurations that an MDM solution can push and deploy to your Mac. So some MDMs you may have heard of are Jamf or Casper, Centrify, Simple MDM. There's a couple various ones, and they all have the ability to set these preferences for you. And if you don't have an MDM, you can do it via a command called defaults. And if you want to read a preference, you can say default read. If you want to write a preference, you can use default write. And so, like, if you want to write bash scripts or however you want to manage your Macs, you can just use this command to deploy these configurations. Now, if you're using an MDM, these configuration strings won't actually reside on disk. They're only in memory, and they're managed by the MDM solution. So you may have to use Python to view some of your CF preferences if you're running as a standard user and you need to see, like, what the MDM solution is setting. So here's a Python script you can use. Now, the first prevention that we're going to recommend is disable macros altogether if your Macs don't need them. There's a CF preference called Visual Basic Macro Execution State, and you can set that as and it's available as of versions 15.32 and newer. And if you can just outright disable them, there's also the ability to do this in the GUI, but if you're using an MDM, it's really nice to go ahead and disable them if you don't need them. We realize that that's not necessarily possible in some environments because macros are living on forever, it seems. But by default, system is no longer callable as of version 15.31. And if you need it for whatever reason, or you find another escape and you want to turn it back on so you can continue to use it, you can turn that on by managing the allow Visual Basic to bind a system preference. Or you can just update your systems and it'll be off by default. Now, as part of our research, we've been working with Microsoft, and they just recently released, as of August, a new configuration as part of our research that allows you to disable the call to popen that we were talking about earlier. And by default, it's on. Or by default, they have it off, so you can manage it, but they won't change it to enforcing by default. But you can turn it on using allow Visual Basic to bind to popen. Warning: this may break third-party add-ins, so definitely test it before you push it. So, as you can see, like we had system, we had popen. This is going to be a continuing thing. More people are going to find more problems with libc.dylib. You can disable the ability to call external dylibs outright as of version 15.31, and that's called disable Visual Basic external dylibs. Note you can bypass this by bringing your dylib with you, so you could create it inside the document and then import all the dylibs if you needed to. But again, this has the potential to break third-party add-ins. Another new configuration Microsoft gave us as a result of our research is the ability to disable that deprecated function we were talking about called MacScript. It's available as of August of this year, and it's available in version 16.16, and it's just called Disable Visual Basic MacScript. It's a Boolean, so you'll need to make sure you set it as a Boolean for it to enforce correctly. If you have Yara deployed in your environment, you can use Yara to look for Office documents that have MacScript or AppleScript tasks in them. So I recommend looking for this if you're hunting. And then your other standard detections and preventions apply because you're looking at reverse shells. You could possibly look at it in Little Snitch or Lulu, which is an open source tool. Monitor processes being spawned from Office products. So if you see like AppleScript being called from Office, that might be a little weird. Or search for unrecognized AppleScripts in your application scripts directory. So if you have a whitelisting solution, or you can get a little hacky with it and you can just remove the write permissions to the com.microsoft.word, Excel, PowerPoint directory so that you can't continue to write files there. I would recommend testing this. You may have some things that have that need the ability to write AppleScripts there. So special thanks to Eric Schweibert and Paul Bowden at Microsoft for their partnership. They've worked with us like the entire way. We've reached out to them every time we found any problems. They've worked with us. So definitely want to call out them. They're not offensive people by any means. They're like the guy who's responsible for VBA at Mac at Microsoft. So that's really cool. I also recommend if you didn't get a chance to check it out, check out the talk for When Macs Come Under Attack by Richie Cyrus. It happened on Friday. He posted his slides on Twitter. Definitely recommend checking out that talk. He had some really good things for hunting down OSA script or various other things that are happening on your endpoint. And we have a full list of references, so if you want to see anything that is interesting to you, so the VB Security Controls PDF is ran by the Microsoft guys. They have documented how you set all those CF preferences we were talking about. And with that, if you guys have any questions, we're more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, go ahead. We got the mic.
It sounds like the best preventative measure against this is just not to run Microsoft Office. So, have you guys done any research into the other ways people can create docs on, Pages, OpenOffice, that sort of thing? Similar kinds of systems within their macro systems? Similar kinds of vulnerabilities within their macro abilities?
Other than their macro abilities? They are out there. There's actually a talk that was right before this that was abusing a lot of the usable functions that are within the Office suite. Now, we were focusing purely on the macros for this document, for this campaign, which led into the research of the sandbox. It's when you're using macros specifically that usually fall within the sandbox. A lot of the other attacks are either like importing like remote templates that prompt for creds and things like that. But I do recommend the talk that was before this that expands on a lot more of functionality within Office that could be exploitable.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
So how often do you get to use this escape now in your work now?
I'm not allowed to disclose that type of information with the blue team so close to me. No, I see what you did there. No, Yeah, I really can't. Sorry, I wish I could.
No comment.
So if we took all those recommendations you had for CF preferences and set them to the strictest, except for, of course, not allowing macros. If macros were still enabled, would this still work?
So if we had all of the CF preferences enabled, the last example that we showed would still work. The temporary file, which is why we provided a couple extra detections and preventions around that. So like not allowing writing to application scripts. If you can lock that down on your Mac, that'll prevent it. As far as actual Microsoft configurations or Apple configurations, we've reached out to both of them to provide a solution for this, and both have not exactly provided a solution that works yet.
Yeah, the whitelisting is being worked on. They're figuring out how to do that, and that involves getting Apple involved. But we could say that another thing, a lot of our mitigations were targeted towards enterprise environments, because that's what we're talking about, be able to set these CF preferences and things like that. On a more personal level, if you're looking to protect your own personal computer, one of the ones, and it's on one of these slides, is I recommend Little Snitch. If you haven't checked that out, it's like $30, and it's a really good monitoring application for Mac OS. And it'll, by default, it takes little configuration. By default, it's going to alert everything that tries to reach outside of your computer. But it comes in really handy, and if you have that enabled, you will see traffic leaving your computer, and that would alert you about the exploitation. Any other questions?
We have drones in the back, so if that's what you're here for, there are drones.
Yeah, we are handing out drones after the talk, so when you're walking out, there's a few boxes back there. Feel free to grab one. But thanks everyone for coming. If you have more questions, we'll be standing out here, and safe travels.